Welcome to another episode of Stories of Awakening podcast. Today I have with me Clare Corado. She's an immigration lawyer in the United States, and we met through a coaching container we are currently in still. And after she said a few things during a coaching call, I felt very close to her, and so we connected after. And I heard her story. So when I heard her story, what she went through, I thought it was a great idea to invite her to my podcast. So here she is. Hi, Claire. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm super happy to be here. I love that you're having these conversations. It's something I kind of was hoping society would have more conversations about publicly, but somebody's got to start that. So I guess it might as well be us, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm very excited about this episode. So this is Stories of Awakening. So tell us your stories of awakening. Start wherever you like. And then I will ask you some questions maybe along the way.
Sure. Yeah, I think the best place to start is just in childhood where I was a very odd child. And that's kind of the feedback that I always got, was that I was very strange. There was something a little bit off about me, and I'll get into specifics. And it was something where I always felt like there's this part of me that I don't understand. It seems like other people aren't having the same experience, but I don't really know how to handle this. I don't really know how to hide it. I didn't know what to do with it. So, more specifically, I would have these like when I was at school, I went to I lived in this community that was rural. It was very conservative. It was a very strictly religious community, Catholic. And so I went to this Catholic school, and whenever they talked about things like, the very violent deaths of some of the Catholic saints, or, even historical things like slavery, I would be very impacted in a way that the other students weren't, where I would like pass out or cry or like have flashbacks to this place I'd never been. And I obviously that was very odd looking, and I was bullied quite a bit for it. I didn't know how to hide it. So I just sort of I would try to guess whenever the lessons might be going in that direction, and I'd be like, I gotta go to the bathroom. And I spent a lot of time in the bathroom hiding out from the world, like to cry or to try to have as much of the reaction or the experience privately in the bathroom versus in front of people. And I also didn't understand why no one else found this, like, why aren't people finding this extremely disturbing? You know what I mean? Like this
Mhm.
information that we're getting. And then at home at night, I would be, I would have a lot of night terrors, a lot of nightmares. I would feel like there were presences in my room at night, like they had bad intentions for me. I had this like like basically like a little shrine thing going on. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Sixth Sense. There's a little kid in it who um basically has like religious statues, and like that's exactly the when I saw that, I laughed as an adult, because it's like, yeah, I had like a rosary, I had holy water, I had all these things. The lights had to be on. I didn't want to be alone. Like I was very odd in that way too. And people were kind of like, oh, there's nothing under your bed, just relax, it's not real. Even though we talk about it at church, like there aren't really demons in here. Like you're fine. But I couldn't overcome it just by trying to. It was just such a huge part of my life. And then I also had an experience where I frequently would feel like something would happen in the world, and it would just be like, I don't know, maybe some interpersonal reaction between people, or something would happen that I would think was not surprising at all. Like, of course, that's probably what's going to happen. And people would be like, oh my gosh, we never saw this coming. Who would have thought? And I would just be like, really? All the indicators were there. Like, it just seemed like the absolute next natural step for something to happen. It was kind of like if you had two trains and they were on the same track and they're going towards each other at high speed. Like, you're not going to be surprised when they crash, right? You saw that coming.
Mhm.
But I always had this experience of like, the train would crash and everyone would be like, no way, how did this happen? Like, we never saw this coming. And I realized that whatever it was inside of me helped me to see many steps further than was kind of typical. And so it freaked people out a lot when I would be like, when I in any way indicated what was likely to happen or just didn't seem unnerved by these things. So I started to try to hide that as much as possible. But it's really hard if you just are pretending that you don't see things that you see or you don't know things that you know. It's just a
So,
very weird situation. So I was, oh, go ahead.
sorry, just a question, but so you were
Yeah.
predicting some events happening?
Yes, sometimes it was predicting events or just even like a natural seeing where things are likely to
Mm-hmm.
go, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of a specific example of that. I don't know. Like, well, I'll give you an example from my adulthood. So I owned a law firm for many years, and I would make these business plans 18 months in the future. It's like it's a very traditional way to do a business plan where you make like a forward-facing 18-month plan of all the business goals you have and things like that. And I had I felt at one point in 2018 that it seemed very important for my business to become totally online. And I thought at the time that it was like, okay, because probably competition is going to go there and people want that, but I have to have this totally automated system online. And I slated that it has to be complete. I felt very strongly it has to be completed by the end of quarter 1, 2020. And so I'm working on this thing, like setting this whole thing up. And I finish like 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time. And then the world shuts down. My law firm's entirely online. And just so stuff like that, where people are
Wow.
kind of like, what are you doing? Why would you think that? I don't always know the reasons, but sometimes it's just like, this is what needs to happen. And then this is what needs to happen. And when I follow that, I
Mm-hmm.
get very good results. And then I was able to keep serving people and it was really helpful. So that's like an example.
Amazing. So that's intuition. So you,
Intuition. Yeah.
yeah, so do you hear it as a voice, or is just a thought in your head, or you see messages around that this
Yeah.
is the right, yeah.
Yeah. So when I was a kid, I didn't have a lot of, it wasn't a very clear thing. It was kind of like a maybe more of a gut knowing, sometimes combined with like a vision type, images. As I've gotten older and as I've gotten training, which I can talk about, kind of how I went to being able to more actively use or work with it, then it's gotten a lot more clear. And so, yes, I typically my most common things are to hear voices,
Mm-hmm.
or to have like visions that aren't, they're kind of symbolic. It's kind of like having a dream while you're awake, where you
Mm-hmm.
see certain things come up, and then it's like you can understand what's trying to happen. But yes, now I'm able to um, more intentionally tap into intuition or the feeling in my body or the things that I see and stuff like that. And it's helpful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's nice what you say about these images as well, because it's what I teach usually about the subconscious is it talks through metaphors and images. And so you will have to interpret. Dreams are often they don't make sense, and there are all stories and images and metaphors. So it's very different for everyone. I'm sure many people might not be able to interpret what you would say would see as a vision, but yeah, it's good to know that is really working like that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and so as a kid, the adults around me didn't really know what to make of it. The most common response I got was, "We need to toughen you up." Like, you're too sensitive. There's something wrong with you. Like, we have to find a way so that you don't cry, and we're going to toughen you up. And I can just tell you that that does not work. I've never been toughened up. I'm 40 years old. If anyone listening has a child like this that they don't understand, don't try to toughen them up. It's not going to help. Um, it's kind of like one of those things where at some point you have to accept who you are as a person and work with the positive side of that and
Mhm.
learn, yes, I've learned how to handle more difficult things, but I never got toughened up. So I sort of like white knuckled it through childhood. And then by the time I got to be in early adulthood, my opinion was that all of this fear of the dark and night and like feeling like I was talking to spirits and stuff like that, that was probably trauma from my religious childhood. And so, because I had other effects from that and it was like kind of depression and things like that. So I got therapy And I thought like that's going to make that go away. You know what I mean? So I'm like working on, Western traditional therapy to learn about talking about your emotions and boundaries and like all the stuff, right? All the
Mhm.
classic things that are important to learn. And what happened was the complete opposite happened of what I thought would happen. So I thought this would just totally alleviate this issue. And instead, it got a lot clearer and a lot stronger. So it was like when I took away my own emotional turmoil and, got very centered in myself and like got mentally healthy, then it was like, oh, wow, I can feel exactly where that. One thing I didn't mention that happened a lot in childhood was I would feel like pain and injuries in other people's bodies. So it's like if someone had an injury, I would feel the pain. And if someone had like grief, I would feel it. But it's like very hard to tell the difference. You have to learn the difference between someone else's stuff and your own stuff if your energetic boundaries are too open. So, but then once I got traditional therapy and got myself in a better place in adulthood, then it was like someone would walk in and I would be like, that person's experiencing grief. Or I would have a more clear step into a different place or a different vision. It just really clarified like where everything was coming from, what was mine and what wasn't. And it felt much stronger. And then I also started hearing more clearly, like not just the intention of spirits, but like the words that they were saying, and I could see like how they were moving and things like that. So I was very freaked out by this. Like, that is not, I thought this thing wasn't real. Like, maybe I really am totally crazy. You know what I mean? Um, because this is just not good. Like, that's just not a thing where I'm
Yeah,
from.
they don't teach us at school that it's possible that these things are real, so nobody knows how to handle them. So that's why we're having this conversation. So if people are experiencing
Exactly.
similar things, they know they are no crazy. It's just part of life. Yeah.
Exactly. And there's this sort of like Catholic perspective on it that I was taught as a kid that they would say it's very important because, obviously the Catholic religion does believe that there's a spirit realm and there are these beings that exist and things like that. And I'm no longer a practicing Catholic, but that is part of the
Hmm.
reality of that is accepted by the Catholic Church. And but they say don't open the door. This is what they said when I was a kid, like don't open the door to the spirit realm because you will probably be attacked by demons. And so as a kid, I was like, I gotta close this door, and I don't know how. And I realized as an adult that that's actually really dangerous for a child who has this sort of natural, uh, you know, natural ability to kind of reach over
Hmm.
to not have basic, don't talk to strangers level instruction in that, which you need. Like someone should have told me that when I was two. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? How do you
Yeah.
do this? How do you say can't be in my room at night?
Hmm. Totally. Um, yeah. So is it, do you see also spirit you were saying?
So it's, I don't, some people say that they see spirits as clearly as like that they're equivalent to humans. And I don't personally have that experience.
Hmm.
When I was a kid, I always had the impression um, that it would be possible to see them. But if I concentrated really hard in a certain way, I could like prevent that from happening. And I put a lot of energy into doing that because I
Hmm.
felt like if there was this thing there that was terrifying me and I could actually see it, like I just knew it would be completely overwhelming. I couldn't handle it. So I was kind of able to, I guess, close the door in some ways.
Hmm.
As I've gotten older, I do, it's more like I can tell their physical location, like where they're standing in relation to me, hear what they're saying. I can kind of see in my mind what their um what their structure looks like and how they move. I don't know, there's something about it for me where it's like how something moves tells me a lot about it. I don't know, like so some things
Hmm.
kind of like slink or some things kind of walk or some things I can feel whether it was like I don't know very much about all of the different alleged types of like spirit things in other realms that there are, but things feel very different if they were like they're like a human that has crossed over versus like something else that I don't know. And so
Hmm.
yeah, I just there are a lot of different things out there.
Yeah.
And if they touch me, happens occasionally, you can kind of feel the texture of it or like there's they feel different.
Hmm. You can also
Mostly I
perceive.
don't allow that.
Great. You can also perceive if it's a lighter energy or darker energy, I guess.
Yeah, so I went to this you know, later in my life, like in adulthood, I went to a school for energy healers. Once I I'll have to circle back around and tell you exactly how I figured out that I wasn't actually crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Go
But once
ahead.
I figured out I wasn't totally crazy, I got training. But I was just going to say that the energy school, the way that the teachers there would describe it is that some spirits are profoundly separated, like that they're in separation from the light. So it's like
Mhm.
not like evil, fear, this is a demon, although some things can be obviously dangerous. It's like just recognizing that for whatever reason that spirit is in a situation where they're just not feeling connection with that at all. And there are kind of ways you can handle that. But yes, I have encountered some things that were in separation, definitely.
I see.
Um, but yeah, so I had this life-changing day. I mean, it was like when people say like, what's the best day of your life? I don't know. This may have actually been it, but I would never historically, I would never admit this when people say, what's the best day of your life, right? It's like the day I realized I'm not totally crazy, which I thought I was my whole life. So it was like a normal day. I went to it was like a family picnic type thing where, like where I'm from in this rural area. I now live in California on the coast in San Diego, but previously I lived in this like, rural farming sort of community in the center of the United States. And so it's just like families and kids running around and like people eating hot dogs and like, a campfire and just people hanging around talking and like drinking beer and just the usual stuff. And I was talking to this one guy he's just an acquaintance. I just vaguely knew him. I'd talked to him as an interesting person. He is very different from me in a lot of ways, like very politically conservative, very like tough guy, like owns a lot of guns. You know what I mean? Just like very different from me in a lot of ways, but I always thought he was interesting. We were talking about, I can't even remember what, and a spirit walks up, kind of like observing our conversation, which I hate when you have the feeling of being observed. There's kind of like, I would call them like lurkers. They just kind of like, you know, standing around, listening to you, checking you out. It's just uncomfortable, just like it would be for,
Hmm.
like if you were just having a conversation in a park with somebody and someone walked up to you like that and just stood there listening, you'd be like, what's your problem?
Hmm.
So I felt that at this moment still thinking this is like not real, right? And I'm trying to ignore it and I'm just having this conversation about something else. And at one point, the guy who I'm talking to, he goes, "Oh my gosh, you could totally feel that, can't you?" And I was like, "Feel what?" Like I didn't even know what he was talking about. And he points to exactly where I know this thing is. And he said, "That thing that's watching us right there." And I about died. I was like, "That thing is real?" And he was like, "Oh yeah." And he tells me this whole story about how he's also had these experiences since childhood and all this stuff. And I'm just like having this, speaking of spiritual awakening, like, oh my goodness, this was totally independent verification. I mean, I was just standing there talking about something else. It was just to have someone else have the exact same experience to point to the same location I knew it was. Um, it was such a wonderful experience for me. And I asked him a lot of questions about it. He had actually also not learned anything about it other than like, I have a lot of holy water in my house too. So it's kind of like, okay, so neither of us has a great solution for this at this point, but it gave me that, oh my goodness. So it's like mind blowing. If this is real and other people are experiencing this, like obviously something exists here. And also, holy cow, I need to figure out how to actually deal with that because I had been kind of trying to train myself like, that's not real. I don't see you, annoying thing right there. Like you know what I mean? Even though I had
Hmm.
like feelings
Hmm.
about it or whatever. So that's when I started taking some classes and seeking out people who knew about such things
And how did you
to
find it
learn, and it was
online?
great.
Sorry.
Oh, the internet. Thank goodness for the internet, Valentina. The same
Yeah,
way we met from across the pond here.
yeah, exactly. Great.
Internet. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, and what you started to go to school, let's say like that, and were they teaching some particular energy technique or was in general about energy, um, the psychic
Yeah.
medium thing? Yeah.
I did a few things. The first thing I did was a class with a woman I found online. I don't remember her name off the top of my head. She's also located in Europe, and um, she taught me about um, energetic boundaries. And it was so hilarious because it's like, it turns out the exact same issues I had with people, like, I don't have boundaries, I'm not being assertive about my needs, like those sorts of things I learned in, traditional therapy, were like, I had the same issues with energy in the spirit world. And I had to kind of be like, oh, here's where I end and someone else begins. Here are the ways I'm accidentally reaching into other people's energy fields just to check it out because I feel nervous, but that's like pattern learned in childhood. And I don't have to be constantly reaching out like that. And in fact, it's kind of inappropriate to do so. So it
Mhm.
was like a lot of just learning like basic energy hygiene. She taught me more about identifying and removing different types of energetic impacts that I had been up to that point just picking up and carrying around, whether it was like someone else's difficult life experiences and their grief or other energy. I was just carrying a lot of stuff with me. So it was like just learning how to let go of that and to identify things. And that was huge. And that was a perfect first start, just like really, really basic. Um, and then I happened to see this is a really good TV show if you haven't seen it. I don't know if you can get it in Europe, but I think it might be on like Hulu or Netflix or something like that in the United States. But it's this documentary TV show called Psychic Kids. Have you heard of this?
No, never. No.
So they basically find kids who are exactly like how I was as a kid. I mean, it's like laughably funny. Kids who are like that, and the adults are like, we don't know what to do with this kid. And instead of saying we're going to toughen this kid up and that's not real, the adults seek out professional adults who actually know how to work with this stuff. So developed psychics or developed, intuitives or medical mediums or, things like that. And those adults come and like mentor the kids, like, here's how you deal with this. Here's how you kick him out of your bedroom. Like, here's how you
Wow.
can use it for good, but you're a child, so it's not like maybe when you're older, but right now you just need to like be able to be a child.
Hmm.
And so I happened upon the show one day and I'm watching it like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one. Like, this is so crazy. And I was thinking, I wish I had like, oh, I wish someone had like found something like this for me when I was a kid. And then I thought, you know what? It's never too late. I'm gonna like I'm gonna find someone like that for myself. And there's actually one of the adults who participates on the show. Her name is Perry Zarella, and she's actually a licensed therapist in the United States, but she also has had even a much stronger experience with spirits like since childhood. And so I worked with her. I hired her to help me. I was like, well, I'm coming a little late. I know you usually work with children. Uh, but and then she taught me a lot more about that. And then I went to to an energy school that specifically it's called the Barbara Brennan School of Healing. And it's specifically that school specifically is designed to train people to do energy healing in a way that's like supposed to be complementary to Western medicine. So it's like in support of other health issues, you can learn to do that. I have not completed it. It's actually the first level's a 4-year program, and I've done 2 years, but it's very intense and like extremely. I have learned a ton from everyone there. It's been really wonderful. So
I can imagine. Wow, that's very interesting. And so you were saying about boundaries, and I think many people are also afraid to, even if they're interested in spirituality and in this kind of spirit world, they are very um, scared of, yeah, being approached by entities that are maybe not love and light.
yeah.
So, yeah, do you have any tip that maybe you can share about how basics, how to protect your energy even before going to bed? When I experience the most is actually as well at night before
Yeah.
going to bed. Hmm.
Yeah, and that's like it feels so much more threatening too, especially if you're like awoken at night and you feel like there's something over your bed. It just can be really disturbing. So no, I totally hear you. As a person who couldn't sleep with the light off until age 38, when I finally got training for this, I hear you. I totally hear you, Valentina. It's so crazy. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, I just said this in public. No, it's true. Now I totally can't. But so the way that I learned how to do that, it was actually from Perry, that therapist slash psychic that I mentioned who I worked with. And what you, the basic idea behind it is that it's very important for you to be centered in your own soul's essence and then to kind of expand that big enough that it's like other things are not really in your space. So it's kind of like an energetic boundary. But so the first thing you have to do is you have to identify what it feels like to be in your own essence. And so, that's not something we're typically taught in modern society, but it's very important. It's something that I definitely would teach kids as young as able who are able to talk, like how to do this. But so one way that you can try to figure out what that feels like is to think to a memory that you have of a time when you felt like totally like yourself, like just enjoy in the moment, very present. Can be something like, oh, I was, like some of the memories I've used are like, oh, when I'm in the middle of dancing and I feel just like completely like joy and I'm feeling the music and it's just like everything else falls away and I feel like oh, this is me. Or, driving up the coast by the ocean, by the Pacific Ocean. So it's like there's a highway that goes up you see the beautiful Pacific Ocean and there's the breeze and the sun and you just feel like, like this is everything, it's like
Hmm.
everything in this moment. So you think to your own life about a time when you felt like that. And then you really focus in on, you try to recall that feeling in your body and you try to notice where that, like, what does that feel like? So, you're kind of meditating on that experience and feeling what it feels like. For a lot of people, it'll feel like you might feel like light and warmth, especially kind of around the center of your body or, kind of sensations like that. And once you have connected with that, you just intentionally work on kind of expanding that. You can almost imagine it being a light or a warmth, and then you just grow it, a little bit bigger until you have a kind of a comfortable level of buffer around yourself. And if you have experiences with things that are, going bump in the night, you can you can uh, the most important thing is be able to take yourself to that place so that you're not operating from, as a child, I now realize I was just terrified.
Hmm.
Certain things feed on that. And it was like I had no idea how to get myself out of that. So it was like it left me very powerless, which is silly because in an actual body, I was actually way more powerful than I think anything that ever visited me in that bedroom at night. And I felt like they could control everything, but it was
Hmm.
just an illusion.
Yeah, this is what I noticed as well, is when I perceive those entities, let's say, it was when I was very scared and I couldn't sleep and I was sleeping with the lights on and then yeah, I actually learned some prayers and that helped as well. Ask protection from other beings as well. That helped.
Oh
But this,
yeah, that's a great thing to mention. If you have certain yeah, certain other other spirits who you feel aligned with, like Saint Michael the Archangel is kind of a traditional one if you come from a Catholic background.
that one.
But there are, lots of pull out the big guns as needed.
Exactly.
But yeah, it's certainly great to call in some assistance with, whatever people feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, and I think your way of doing it is really for everyone, so whoever can do it. So that's very useful to
Exactly.
know. That's great. And another thing that was very interesting for me, that you mentioned actually when we had a chat, is how you protect your own house because you had visitors in your house. And I think it might be similar, but
Mhm.
if you want to share.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's been one of the biggest, most life-changing things for me is knowing that my home is a safe place where I don't have these constant encounters because it feels very, it's just like yeah, if there were just human strangers walking into your house, you would
Hmm.
just be like, oh my gosh, never know when there's going to be someone randomly like in my bathroom, in my bedroom. Like this is just not okay.
Hmm.
So, most of it is sort of based on that exercise with like essence. And so it's like essentially I stay in my own essence and it also just sort of have there's almost like an energetic shift in I'm trying to even think how to put it into words. It's like I know a lot of people have very like complicated routines, but for me the thing that works the best is I don't actually have to do a bunch of physical, like I'm not, yes, I sometimes cleanse my space or things like that, but I don't have to do an outward ritual. I just can carry myself energetically in a way where I know that this is my domain and my personal boundary
Hmm.
is I don't entertain spirit visitors in my house without permission. So I allow spirits I've known and loved in life, and I allow, like spirit guides, things that are, I believe are assisting me and I can hear them and they're with me and they're allowed. Other than that, it's just like the random stragglers. It's like, no. And so it's just like, I don't know, it's like a totally different way of holding yourself where you're just kind of like, no, I totally don't entertain that. And sometimes
Hmm.
I do, like I would say, entertain it intentionally when I'm outdoors in a nice area. And I'll say, if there's anything hear who needs assistance because a lot of times those spirits that are kind of lost, they're just kind of roaming around and they just need redirected. And I learned more about how to do that in the energy healing school. So sometimes it'll be a little bit like, okay, we're going to hold office hours outside of my house for a set period of time. And then things that approach them, I will try to assist or help them move along with
Hmm.
some other being, can handle that. Um, but yeah, I'm just like not available. I'm 100% not available for like that kind of stuff, especially at
Yeah.
night, especially in my house.
So
No.
it's kind of declaring it. Just you declare,
Yeah.
yeah. You can
It's
say
like
it.
you just are like,
Hmm.
yeah. It's almost like this is I'm gonna draw a weird parallel here, but I'm gonna go for it. It's almost like when you're dating and you there's a certain way, it's like an invisible way that you hold yourself that kind of makes it known whether you are available for a relationship or not, and almost changes the way people who approaches you and how they treat you. I mean, not that it's totally your fault or anything like that, but I've just noticed that I've been in different spots in my life where it's like, if I hold myself in a way that's like, I'm not entertaining any BS here, so don't even try it. It like has an energetic effect on
Hmm.
like the random men in my circle or in my, community or whatever, versus times when I felt more like, oh, I don't know if I'm good enough and I feel kind of uncomfortable. And it's like, then it's just like, it almost energetically seems to give people permission to cross my boundaries and like get in my space and harass me and things like that versus just being like, nope, not
Hmm.
happening. That's kind of like a real world parallel, I would say, that I've seen.
Yeah, that's a great example. Thanks. Yeah, it makes it very clear for me for sure. Yeah. Yeah, is how much you want to accept and you say it and you match it energetically too. I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I should say too, I definitely always want to say that there really are there really are situations, I've seen them, I do believe in them, where you can have something in your house that is quite dangerous. And I absolutely, in circumstances like that, if it's not the run-of-the-mill stuff, I 100% believe that people should find someone who is highly equipped to handle that sort of clearing or cleaning. And there are professionals, anyone from, ironically, even though I'm not a practicing Catholic, I mean, there are Catholic trained exorcists.
Yeah.
There are, other people who are in the spiritual world who are able to um, try to remove something that's become really problematic. And I think it's important to also know your limits. And if you feel overwhelmed by something, to seek out qualified assistance for that. So I don't want anyone to hear this and be like, oh, Claire said she just feels like, hey, don't bother me. And then like, this like mega demon I have in my house is like,
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very important to tell people that there is a solution and there are actually people that do that as a job, as you say,
yeah,
exorcism is that basically. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, unfortunately we are all influenced by TV and movies and stuff. So we are scared, but we don't actually know what to do if some stuff like that happen. So yeah,
Right.
online there are a lot of resources and people that you can reach out if you feel there is something off in your house. Yeah.
Yeah. And follow your gut about that for sure. It's the worst feeling to feel intuitively like something's wrong or something not good is happening there or that you're in danger and then to not take action. It's just, I think, very unnatural actually to try to suppress
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm very curious. So I have a few questions. So when you go out and you feel like you want to help some spirits to with whatever they need, I wanted to know if you see them every day. It's something that are so common that you see them every day if you want to, or is something rare?
So I personally don't see them every day and I don't want to. I don't believe that it's actually at this point in my life, I don't believe that it's my calling to be like a professional medium or to help people clean things out of areas. It just has not felt like something that is
Hmm.
specifically important for me to do. So I just have kind of set boundaries and I just don't really get very involved. I do run into things in other people's houses or in certain places where sometimes things will wander in and I will just like handle it on a case by case basis,
Hmm.
usually just by I used to just kind of be so fearful of those things that would be like, oh, there's something here, and like I've got to leave, or I've got to. But now it's more just like a literally like exactly what you would do if someone walked into your house. You would say like, what are you doing here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. What do
And
you
see what
need?
they say,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, like what are you actually seeking at this point? And then depending on the answer, like call in some help or kind of redirect. Be aware that even if you can hear what they're saying, just like human beings, they don't have to say things that are true. You know what I mean? So sometimes you'll just get like kind of crazy answers and you're like, yeah, that's just totally probably not true. And also you can't be.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's something that, it's I think it's a really beautiful thing if you encounter a spirit that's kind of lost, bumbling around, and it is looking for assistance. And if it's something I can provide, I will, just some like kind of redirection towards light or towards another spirit that's really equipped to handle that.
Yeah.
Then like, yeah, just like you'd help a neighbor or someone who just like,
Yeah.
asked you for a cup of water. Like, sure, totally. I can do that. We can get this taken care of.
That's nice. Um, and you were saying also about emotions. I don't know if you can explain it, but if you can, how do you understand if it's your emotion or you're picking up other people, emotions?
That's a really great question. It used to be extremely difficult for me because it felt exactly the same in my body. Um, and now I think there's some amount of just being aware and observing over time. You can start to learn, how it feels slightly different. And you can also intuitively, for people who have a lot of sort of, the ability to intuitively ask, like, is it this or is it that? You can, like, when you feel something strong come on, you can just stop what you're doing and kind of get centered in your body and say, like, is this is this mine or is this coming from somewhere else? And sometimes you can, kind of figure it out that way. But
Hmm.
realistically, the thing that helped me by far the most was traditional, like Western cognitive behavioral therapy. It's just the most traditional thing where they just teach you like what's a cognitive distortion or certain like anxiety thought patterns, and you just realize how that's, not true, and then undoing certain things that we all, kind of pick up in childhood. It's, being a kid can be rough, and so sometimes you just absorb the issues of adults around you, or you felt threatened in a certain way and you like create weird coping mechanisms. So
Hmm.
it's like the more I was able to bring light to those and just realize, okay, like that's not true, or that doesn't have to be that way, and develop a healthier way, then it made it a lot more clear. And I started having more like kind of like directional awareness. So it would be like, oh, it's coming from that direction or that person or that place or like this, and that made it a lot more, it's a lot easier if you can feel where it comes from versus just like feeling it.
True. Yeah. Um, it doesn't happen to me too often, but when it happens and I realize that it's not mine, an emotion that is not mine, what I say is simply, this is not for me to process. And actually, I feel better. It
Mhm.
actually helps.
Yeah.
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 But
And really, you're not helping the other person if you take it and it's not, yeah,
true,
not yours to
exactly.
process.
Yeah, but it's hard to distinguish, especially I think at the beginning, if nobody teaches you how to do it as well. But yeah,
Exactly.
healing through therapy or meditation, I think those two things can really help you understand who you are, your core, your center, and so everything else that is not that, you will be able to understand, I think.
Yeah, and I think some of those things, sometimes people focus a lot on trying to like stop certain experiences. Like, I don't want to feel other people's pain, for example. But I've kind of come to understand that, yes, I wasn't handling it in a healthy way before by taking that on, and especially physically in my body. But I do think it's a clue to why I'm actually here in this lifetime and what I can do. And it's like if I can hold myself in my own space, which I'm much better at now, and then be available for people. I find a lot of people when they, even when we're working on their legal matter, which has nothing to do with this, I tend to get a lot of, hey, can I talk with you about this other thing? And it's like, just this, and I do like consultation, like consulting work, for people too, and kind of like as a personal advisor with people. And it's like they have, there's a way that people can release things using this kind of natural ability that I have. And it's like, it helps in the healing process or kind of like helps people work stuff out. They can bounce things off of me. So it's like, oh, there's a good use for that if you can use it in a healthy way. It's not just like I run away from everyone's pain forever, you know? That would just be
Hmm.
shame.
Yeah, this is so amazing. And my next questions was actually, how do you use your gifts to help in your work, because in my case, I was working in finance in London for many years. And when I awaken, I'm still awakening, of course, but when I started to realize all these kind of things, I got more sensitive to energy. I just couldn't work there anymore. For me, there was just the
Hmm.
option to leave and start to do it on my own. So
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm wondering how you match these two sides of you.
It's a work in progress. No, I totally hear what you're saying, and I think that's a common experience that people have. I personally have been fortunate in that I was able to make some shifts in my life over time so that I live physically in a location here on the California coast that feels energetically really good to me. So I have that surrounding energy that just, it feels like totally different from where I used to live. I think it's important that people kind of align their living situation with a place they feel good. And
Mhm.
then also then the context of your work. Yeah, there may be some jobs or industries or workplaces where it would be totally crushing energetically or you should just leave. And at the same time, if you can find a place to work or work with others who, you don't feel that and it feels like a good space and you can be yourself, then and that's really wonderful. So I'm fortunate now that I work with people who are, know kind of who I am and how I am, and they're fine with that. They love
Mhm.
me anyway. Um, and I would really love to see society move in a direction where you can totally be a medical professional, you could be a surgeon, you could be a politician, you could be a lawyer and use this other part of yourself. It seems really insane that those are some of the professions in finance, like you mentioned, that those are some of the professions that are the most closed off to people using their intuition. And it's like, geez, if someone's got someone's life in their hands, wouldn't you love it if not only they were trained on all the latest surgical techniques, but then when they came down to that question of like, from the surgery textbook, it could go this way or that way, and they're even, but I am going to use my intuition to try to save this person's life. You want both. You don't want someone who's just like, oh, intuition and no training. Like, no, I want to be the best attorney I can be. And I want to have that gut instinct of like, I feel like someone's not being truthful here, or something doesn't add up. Like there's like this irritation feeling of like, I think something's going to go wrong with this. And it's like, and then use my technical expertise as well. So I don't know. I see us going as a society in that direction where we just
Yeah.
are more open to the full capacity of the human experience and like human capabilities. They say we're using so little of what we're actually capable of. So let's be open to new things, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. This is how I see society going as well. I think this is the future will be more and more accepted. More people will talk about it. And yeah, I don't think everyone will believe in these things, but probably the majority at some point will. So yeah, I see all these different fields, finance, or anything, honestly, yeah, going in that direction. And that's
Yeah,
exciting.
my fantasy is like it's not even something like because I kind of don't consider it anything particularly special. It's just kind of like, you know, just a run-of-the-mill thing like, oh, this kid's really good at art. This kid's very has very good coordination physically and like this kid is very energy sensitive and like this kid, is
Yeah.
great at writing. It's just like no big deal. Like, we've all got kind of our things that come to us more naturally. Like that's totally fine. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping by discussing this publicly. I'm hoping that we move more in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely. Also because many kids, I think shut down their gifts because they're not accepted by society or their parents or the people around them. So they want to be accepted and loved by these people. And so the solution is shut down these gifts, and then maybe after 30 years they start doing it again. But it would be great
Yeah.
to, yeah, to help them throughout their life, like for you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's a huge waste of talent if we're
Hmm.
suppressing people's natural skills. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing all of this. And I wanted to ask you, and this is a question that I ask all the time because it's very present in my life. When you realized that all this was real and you started to really awaken also your gifts even more and heal, how did your life change? Did you see shifts in your career or friends around you, or you said you moved to another country, to another state too? So,
I love that Freudian slip. Does feel like another country. Certain regions of the United States are like, it's all the United States, but let's just be honest, it's a foreign country. Yeah, I actually did experience like it was like an earthquake in my personal life where um it just felt like everything crumbled from, my long-term marriage to like where I live to just a ton of things one after another. Just, even though I'm still in the same profession, sort of, I had formed this business and I ended up, selling that and departing from that. And I wasn't even sure if I was going to keep doing, like, I just there were so many unknowns. It was very terrifying. I felt like
Mhm.
part of me was dying, and it's such an intense experience. I'm a huge believer in when people are facing those like almost rebirth moments and huge transition, like spiritual transitions in their life, that they really seek out like a spiritual companion of some kind who can walk with them, not tell them what to do, not be their guru, but like just like, hey, yeah, it's really rough. You know what I mean? Because it's just a very difficult thing to go through on your own. So
Yeah,
yeah, I've got some great
exactly.
people in my life too that help with that.
That's great. Yeah, I want to share also this part of the journey because I think it's important that people know that if they go through that, they're not alone. There are coaches, communities now online. You can really find everyone. And yeah, I totally agree that is good. Even if it's just online support, it's better maybe if it's in person, but even online support can really, really help to go through these big transitions. And I feel most of people that awaken, let's say like that, yeah, they have this death and rebirth and they change all areas of their life.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an
Yeah.
important thing to mention, definitely.
Yeah. And so, sorry, last question, keep coming with question.
I love it. I love it.
uh, what about your kids? So they are aware of all these things already? When did you start telling them? I don't know how old they are. And also, just if you want to share.
Yeah, so I have been open about it to some degree with my kids. Um, I have, I don't want to talk directly about my children's experiences, but they have differing levels of like similar experiences. And so as needed, instead of kind of the experience I had where it was like, that's not a real thing, I have just tried to, as they've had certain experiences, teach them, oh, here's how you can handle that. Like it's, let me know how it goes. Like, let's try this. You know what I mean? And then just hear their observations about that. And it is interesting how much it varies from person to person and child to child. Um, and yeah, I feel like, in some ways having children makes you face things. You see your children have struggles that maybe you even had as a child. And it was like, you just, for me at least, it was just like, oh my goodness, I struggled through this in childhood and I just can't like watch another kid do this. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I do feel like it's a fortunate situation when a kid who has those experiences also happens to have a parent or someone close to them who either knows how it is or recognizes it for what it is and doesn't shut it down, but instead like seeks some kind of assistance for that. It can make such a huge difference because really kids should just be kids. Like they don't need to be figuring out if they're going to be a healer or psychic or like whatever, how it fits into their life. It's just like they just need to like not take candy from strangers on the energetic sphere either, just like they are
Mhm.
not supposed to in real life. Just like don't play with that thing that shows up in your bedroom at night and like that's it. And then as an adult, they can not fear that and then develop it in whatever way feels like they're called to do.
Amazing. Thanks so much for sharing all of this. Is
Yeah, it
there
was no.
No, I just wanted to ask you if there is anything else that you want to share, or yeah, otherwise we can
No, it
close
was
here.
wonderful being here with you. I love that you're having these conversations and um it was just it's just such a serendipitous thing for us to meet and I'm so happy that I was able to come on here and talk with you and I've really enjoyed all the episodes, so I'm looking forward to hearing all of your other people you're going to have on here too. It's wonderful.
Thank you so much, and I'm sure this episode will be useful for so many people. Some of them I know already, so I will send it to them as soon as it's ready.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Claire. Okay, and thanks everyone for listening, and I'll catch you to the next episode.